And welcome to Libertarian Counterpoint. With me today is John Kabateck, and Unibear is joining us today for the show. All right, tonight I got a quick introduction about the value of the non-aggression principle, which is something that us libertarians hold dear. And the issues that are going on in the world today would be mitigated if we all took the opportunity to understand why non-aggression is so important. Inhumanity breeds inhumanity, and when you grant yourself the moral authority to act under aggression, then the people you aggress against grant themselves the moral authority to act with aggression against you. And then you end up with a spiraling cycle of aggression, and ultimately you end up with is pain and suffering. This is why the Libertarian Party and the Libertarian principles, the Libertarian philosophy believes that non-aggression principle is the most fundamental principle that we hold dear. Okay, for that, we're going to move on. We have Mr. Richard Fields, who's been wandering around Europe the last few weeks, and he's got a little suggestion about the lessons of history. So let's hear from Mr. Fields.
Richard Fields here, reporting from Northern Europe. For the last 3 weeks, I have been traveling in Poland and the Baltic states of Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. I'm now in Helsinki, Finland. The recorded history and architecture of these countries goes back over 800 years. All these countries have been independent nations only for a portion of that period. In the 16th and 17th centuries, the Kingdom of Poland and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania were ruled by one monarch and made up the largest and most populous kingdom in Europe. Finland was part of the Swedish kingdom for a few hundred years. During World War II, Poland, Finland, and the Baltic states were the battlefield between Germany and the Soviet Union. Finland lost a lot of its eastern territory to the Soviets. After the war, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia were annexed into the Soviet Union. Anti-Soviet citizens of those Baltic countries were shipped into slavery and starvation in Siberia. They were replaced by ethnic Russians. Many of them and their descendants live there till this day. Poland became a satellite state to the Soviets. During the wartime occupation of Germany, upwards of 90% of the Jewish population in these countries was murdered, over 6 million in total. I visited Auschwitz, one of the death camps where Jews were gassed to death by the millions. I also visited the KGB headquarters in Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania. The entire basement was a prison for anyone or the family of anyone who opposed the Soviet occupation. Those lucky enough to survive the prison were sent to labor camps in Siberia on the shores of the Arctic Ocean, where they were forced to build their own shelters out of driftwood and dirt, and to fish in the freezing Arctic waters to provide fish for Soviet soldiers. If they survived, they did so by stealing some of the fish they caught. Many of those imprisoned in the KGB headquarters were taken to an execution chamber in the building and shot to death. I talked to one of the survivors of the Siberian labor camps. He was 35 before he had a meal large enough to feel full. The number of people killed by Stalin through executions and starvation is estimated at somewhere between 9 million and 60 million. No one really knows. Visiting this part of the world and learning its history is a stark reminder of how humans can be to each other if they are convinced that those they are killing or enslaving are less than human, others. Nazis killed Jews, the Roma, and the disabled. The Soviets killed anyone considered not a true believer in the socialist communist narrative of the government. Mark Twain and others are reported to have quipped that history does not repeat, but it rhymes. There's a lot of rhyming going on right now. The Hamas-ruled Arabs in Gaza killing Jews on the anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, no less. The Israeli response is to level Gaza and kill anyone who gets in the way, when there is no real viable option to get out of the way. Russia invaded Ukraine to protect the interest of the Russian-speaking people in eastern Ukraine. Never mind that the Russian speakers in Ukraine are descendants of the Russians that were sent to Ukraine to replace the 100,000 or more Ukrainians who were sent to Siberia during the Stalin era. China would like to gain control of Taiwan because voters in the United States are supporting politicians who would love to please their defense industry patrons by getting us involved in proxy wars in all of these global conflicts. Voters are forgetting that the other in Russia and China is a nuclear power, and the ally in Israel is also well equipped with nuclear weaponry. And wars have a way of escalating. Reporting from the fields, I'm Richard Fields. See you next week.
Oh, the history of the death spiral. That's don't to make light of it, but it's hard to. It's a serious issue, and but we're not here to talk about that today. We're here to talk about the bright side of what the NFIB has managed to accomplish this year down here in the state capitol. And to start off, to no one's surprise, Labor got a lot of. I'm going to steal this right from your website. To no one's surprise, Labor got a lot of what it wanted out of the bills, out of the legislative session, but it didn't get everything it wanted. There was a few surprises in there. So what was the biggest surprise that you saw that Labor didn't get what you wanted?
Well, thanks a lot for having me, by the way. I mean, we represent about 13,000 small businesses here in California at the NFIB, National Federation of Independent Business, and 300,000 nationwide. And what they're all telling us right now is they need an upward spiral. You talked about the downward spiral? They need an upward spiral of hope. And to answer your question, I would say absolutely. We were pleased that the governor saw the light and vetoed a bill that would have extended and expanded unemployment insurance benefits to striking workers. This would have basically allowed any striking worker in California the ability to get unemployment insurance benefits all at a time when our state budget, our unemployment insurance trust fund rather, is $18 billion with a B, $18 billion in the red in terms of what we owe the federal government. So that veto, which would have really set a precedent, not just here but across the nation, stopping the expansion and the extension of UI benefits to striking workers is the right message, and it actually keeps our state moving forward instead of further into a pool of red.
Yeah, and wouldn't that actually put the government's weight behind the alleged strikers because now the strikers, they don't have, one of the reasons you strike, right, you prevent the income from the business, but you also prevent the income from the striker, which actually creates the tension for both of them to get to the negotiating table. We need our income back, and hey, we need our income back, and so that loss of income actually what forces both the people to compromise. And so if you have the government putting their scale, well, we're gonna help these workers out with financing so they can actually strike longer, so they don't have the same incentive to have to compromise, incentive to have to sit down at the table and work because the government's helping them out. So
yeah, unemployment insurance was let's remember, it was developed as an opportunity, as a temporary safety net, as a temporary help and assistance to those who lost their job through no fault of their own. This is very different than those who actually choose to leave their post, leave their position, and strike. And as it was reminded to us by a Democrat in the legislature who we were talking to this about during our lobby day, that this is not just necessarily a bunch of striking entertainment industry workers all en masse. This could be 2 or 3 workers in a break room who decide that there are certain amenities or food or coffee that's not to their liking. Those 2 or 3 can start to strike and actually walk out, and then yet, if this had passed, claim unemployment insurance benefits, further, again, deepening our state into the
So
red.
it's not even a real strike. They're talking about even a quasi-strike. I don't feel like coming in today, so I'm going to call it a strike, and so now I get unemployment benefit because I want a working vending machine, so I'm going to go on strike. And because that kind of thing would have been possible.
And as you said, absolutely, and as you said, all at the expense of so many other workers. You know, this was pushed by big labor, which represents less than 18% of the workforce. But at the end of the day, even those workers wouldn't benefit from this. But the majority of other workers in the private sector, in small businesses on Main Street, would have been devastated by this. And the small business owners, it would have just pushed them over the edge to leave California that much faster.
Yeah, and they're already seeing an exodus of small business owners and employees. Anybody who can leave California and has any type of desire is. I know my community has suffered a lot of loss of brain drain
Yeah.
A lot of our top talent has left to other states because, they're smart people have options, right? And so.
Very pleased about that.
So that is a good one. That is a good
Yes.
one. So what good for small business bills were signed into law this year?
Yeah.
I mean, we next week we'll cover a whole laundry list of ones that were bad, but this week, what do we got that was good this year?
Yeah, I mean, we are pleased that the governor sought to push the red button on a number of bills, but there were a couple green buttons, where things move forward that small business did support. One actually would actually give employers and workers more flexibility to provide and receive electronically information in the workplace. You would think this one sounds like a no-brainer, right? In this day and age in 2023, but actually on the books in California, we still have so many arcane laws that still require employers to deliver and distribute to their workers something that is in a hard copy form. Yes, in 2023. This one particular piece of legislation basically allows employers to distribute materials to their employees that's electronic. I know, again, it sounds like a no-brainer, but it is a good thing because had they not done it, and had they not done it in other than a hard copy form, they would have actually been liable and open up to lawsuits and penalties. I can't believe it, but that is actually a good step in the direction of a good bill.
Yeah, well, it's a good bill cleaning up something that probably shouldn't have been that. Hey, you having a requirement to distribute information to your employees is probably okay, right? Even as a libertarian, quash about it a little bit, but okay, fine. You want to make sure that employees get the information they need. Okay, fine. But to dictate how you do that is kind of above the pale, right? Because as we know, technology changes. We used to write scrolls, and now we send mail, and now mail's expensive, so now we send emails.
Well, and I think a lot of this was really beneficial through, as we're seeing now with a much more remote workforce, right? Yeah. So more employers are saying, look, it's not as easy for me, or it's more costly for me to have to mail out to 50, 60 employees, or even a few, versus just sending it through email. So again, they're not going to be held liable. This is not rocket science, but it does help small business owners with a little bit of hope. And we like that.
And a little bit of hope is, hey, if people are printing less paper and sending less mail, that's good for the environment. Even if it's just a small percentage, every percentage counts, right?
Yeah.
So what else did we get? What else did they actually have in the past that's good for businesses?
Well, another green button bill that small business, ethnic businesses, and a lot of folks out there supported that really will help is a creation of on the governor's office website portal, the state portal that helps business in the governor's office of business development. There is now what's going to be called a front door, which is actually going to be a much more open door, many more resources for small businesses, ethnic businesses, people coming into California to actually be able to access information about how to bid for state contracts, how to access information, lending opportunities, finances, resources, and other ways to help their businesses either get started or grow. Again, it sounds like something that should have been years or decades ago, but again, we're really pleased with this one. It does actually expand the governor's office portal, and small business owners can, and aspiring small business owners can go there and take a look at that and really take advantage of that.
I think most of my community would probably like make the government less complicated. You don't need these kind of things, but if you're going to have the complicated government, then okay, having a portal like this makes sense, right? It's one of those things. We wish this kind of thing wasn't necessary, but the world is what the world is, and so you got to, and we are in California, getting them to decomplicate the process of all these things. Not on the table, right? At least anytime soon. So making it easier to access and making the information more readily available is a good thing. So, okay, so what bad for business bills stalled this year that you guys are most proud of? Maybe your biggest accomplishment, or the ones that you feared the most that didn't get passed through.
Yeah, well, and definitely in addition to that one that would have expanded unemployment insurance benefits, we've seen some other real good, kind of push the brakes by the governor and by our state leaders, thankfully. We spoke, NFIB got very noisy, the business community, the small business community got noisy. A couple other doozies that we saw, that we've seen before, that was stopped this year was a stop to an effort to create universal single-payer healthcare in California. Now, everybody believes that there should be some ways to improve healthcare, but do we really want to leave it in the wonderful masterminds that brought you EDD and the DMV? We think that something as important as taking care of grandma or your neighbor or your daughter or your friend, something as important as healthcare shouldn't be left in the hands of bureaucrats, and definitely not politicians at a count this, well over $500 billion per year cost.
Yeah, well, politicians running healthcare. If anything scares you, it's getting politicians involved in the day-to-day business of your healthcare. I mean, they already are, right? There are already so many regulations that politicians already are kind of involved themselves in your healthcare, especially since over the last 3 years. But yeah, to have them directly involved is even scarier for me. And so yeah, that's a good one. We're glad to not have passed, because single payer, it's one of those things that it sounds good. It sounds like, okay, it sounds reasonable. I don't even say good. It sounds fairly reasonable that, okay, healthcare costs are exploding and we need to find some way to rein them in. But you're not actually understanding why healthcare costs are exploding when you're doing this. You're just saying, hey, healthcare costs are exploding, this is a solution, rather than going, okay, why are healthcare costs exploding? What's the actual cause of healthcare costs exploding? And no one wants to ask those questions, right? No one really wants to ask that question.
Yeah, it's just, again, an example of where, you know, we really look at something like this and think the soundbite sounds great, but at the end of the day, the real casualties are going to be the very people that we're looking to try and help here, right? Are going to be the working families, small businesses. These are people who are going to be paying much more higher taxes. They're going to be having less access to care. We've seen this tried in other parts of the world, and there has been limited access, long lines, higher costs, and at the end of the day, people who suffer more. So let's create a free marketplace. It's working. There's always ways to improve it. We even think that the Covered California exchange isn't perfect, but it is actually one of the better exchanges in the country. But we think there's ways where people ought to have choice and access and affordability. And putting it in the hands of those who have given you the long lines at the DMV and the upside down EDD system, just to name a few, aren't the ones we should necessarily be trusting.
You know, maybe if we didn't have certificate of need laws and hospitals could build hospitals where and when they wanted them, you know, some of these solutions would find themselves. Okay, so what else do we got? What other bills did we help stall or that didn't get passed this year that were on the fear list? Yeah.
So, well, one that we were really pleased that the governor kind of tapped into his, I think, entrepreneurial spirit and understanding the importance of the small business and the innovation of California was actually his vetoing of a bill that would have required one individual, human being, to be in an autonomous truck. Now, right now, California is home to the development of autonomous trucks and autonomous vehicles. And while there's definitely an opportunity to expand and grow on that, labor, again, stepped in and said, nope, we need to make sure that in these self-driving trucks, there always must be one individual, one person that is present in perpetuity. The problem with that is actually it defeats the very purpose of a self-driving truck. Reason that we're seeing a lot of excitement. We saw everybody from the California Chamber of Commerce to small business groups, ethnic business groups supporting this supporting autonomous trucks, is that they see the problems we have with supply chain at our ports, the problem we're having with trying to find skilled workers. There are about 80,000 openings for truck drivers in just California alone. So what we saw was the governor veto that. He basically said, look, we're going to stifle innovation in California. We're going to stifle the ability for us to actually move things, speed to market, from the ports to small businesses and get things in the hands. So, but this was, again, one very clever way where labor was saying, look, we need to really kind of make sure that we're taking care of the Teamsters. But the governor didn't see it into that. I think he realized innovation's too important. We have rules, we have a regulatory process that our state leaders are looking at, but at the time right now, that just was kind of a backwards way. Another one that I actually wanted to mention was actually we stopped a corporate tax, a wealth tax of 1.5% on higher earners in California, but at the end of the day, what that was going to do was send the message to the rest of the country and the world that California is, again, putting more taxes on people who are already the highest taxes in the taxed in the country. So we stopped a wealth tax, but we call it actually a tax on Main Street as well, because we all know these taxes trickle down to the mom and pops.
Yeah, well, the problem with wealth taxes is what day, because on any given day, your wealth can change dramatically, right? Just look at the stock market or Twitter. One day you can, your stock's up and you're $100 million wealthier, and then the next day your stock's down and now you're poor. So which day are you going to charge them their wealth tax on?
Absolutely.
Or if you're real estate, one day your house is worth $200,000. 6 months later, it's worth $500,000 because of something. 2 years later, it's worth $300,000 again. When are you going to? What's the wealth? How are you going to tax that kind of wealth? Is silly. Taxing wealth is just silly, and
it sends a wrong message.
And again, the people are wealthy because they know how to pass those kind of costs on. Yeah, and so who ends up paying these costs? It's always the little guy, whether it's the little small business or your customers. The customer is generally the one who pays all these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We also were pleased actually to see that, there was a measure that would have been on next year's ballot that actually was stopped in its tracks. And it was going to ensure that all Californians, there was going to be a measure that would have ensured all Californians have the right to unionize in a business as small as 1 or 2 employees. And again, another push by big labor to try and require that workers in every single workplace, your little tiny mom and pop small business on the corner to a medium-sized auto shop, would have ensured and basically deemed all Californian workers the right to actually unionize. May sound good, but at the end of the day, we think this totally pokes a hole through entrepreneurial spirit, through Main Street entrepreneurism and small businesses. So we were very pleased to NFIB to have fought that one and beat that one.
Well, thank you for winning that one, because I also think it infringes on the rights of those of us who don't want to be union members. Because if you're sitting there and you were working at some place and 55% of your fellow employees vote to be a union, well, now you're in a union whether you want to be or not. And now you may not have to pay union dues, but you know how unions operate. You're going to get pressure to join something you don't want to be part of. So we've got about 5 minutes left. So what's coming up in the next year that's positive? Let's talk about positive for the NFIB and legislation. Is there anything positive you guys are working on, or what are you guys looking forward to?
I think an area that we are actually hoping to see some real change and some real reform is in the area of crime, property crimes. I think we've talked before about how disappointed we are that we see policymakers really doing nothing to address it. In fact, last year in the 2022 session, there were 17 bills introduced. None of them made it out. Both of them Republican and Democrat authored, that was going to help to reform and fix these property crime issues. And Prop 47, which is at the root of this the value of property. This last year, we saw 8 bills introduced. None of them made it out of committee. The reason I say there's a glimmer of hope is people in California are just done. We're seeing people rise up. We're seeing district attorneys like Chesa Boudin in San Francisco get recalled by Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians. We're seeing voters say enough is enough when it comes to property crimes. I can't deal with this anymore, and this is my little small business that's getting robbed daily, and nobody's fixing it. But we're also seeing people rise up and doing things. We may see some things on the ballot next year, on the statewide ballot, that would actually help fix and address Prop 47, help fix the issue here. Fentanyl, homelessness. We're seeing the district attorneys and the retailers and small business kind of working together. The reason I say this is a good thing is I think voters are finally saying, look, we're going to get heard. We're going to overturn the bad stuff. We're going to move forward to fix this. And I think we'll just keep an eye on it. I think we're going to see some cool things on property crime with the voters, not the politicians, but the voters rising up and getting some things done.
Well, which should be good, because a lot of the voters who are tired of this kind of thing have left. And so if it's how much it was going to take those who are left, to kind of wake up and say, hey, we went too far. There was a point that we were over-criminalizing things. Of course, we're passing 2,000 laws every year, so of course we're over-criminalizing. You can't talk about over-criminalization without talking about the over-lawization.
I like it.
The over-lawization of the society, right? You have to have both conversations. And so if you're going to continually pass laws, then you're going to have criminals, because you're literally creating criminals every time you pass a law. And so there is that. But property crimes, as libertarians, we say, what is the, your property and your person. That's your fundamental right, is to your property and your person. And when we have the government whose main job is supposed to be to protect your property and your person, deciding not to protect your property and the person because we're going to protect some philosophical theory, I don't know. I think we've kind of gone down too far down the road. We've got 2 minutes left. So where can people find out about you?
You can go online to nfib.com. There's a California page, tells you all about what we're all about. We are there as an organization to make sure we're helping to be your voice in the state capitals, in Washington, in the courts. But our main focus is to make sure small businesses are heard. So nfib.com, we encourage every small business owner to give a thought about joining. It helps you to know that you're not alone, that you're fighting together, that you're making sure that your doors are open, more people are employed, and that you're taking that little light bulb of a dream that you created your business with, and you're able to actually do something with it. And that's what we're all about. So nfib.com, and we welcome anybody who would like to be a part.
Well, I thank you for being here tonight. I thank you for all the work you guys are doing on helping small businesses. And like I said, probably talk about next work, gig workers. Gig workers are included in those small businesses because they are entrepreneurs.
We love them.
So the NFIB will help you as my fellow gig workers out there. And I mistimed this one. We've got a minute left.
Yeah, all good.
So we get to write for a minute. So what's going on?
Yeah. So, and I think we're really going to see a lot of accountability. I think one thing that we encourage people to do in this, as we're looking ahead at the 2024 cycle, ask those tough questions of your candidates. When those people are running for office, for city council, state legislature, Congress, ask them the tough questions. What are you going to do to help create jobs? Fix Main Street? What are you going to do for me to make sure that I can continue to thrive as a small business owner or as a family member? And how are you going to protect us? Don't be afraid to ask them, and don't be afraid to hold them accountable all the way through Election Day, and vote for those who really say they're going to do what they're going to do.
And hold them accountable past Election Day.
Absolutely.
That's the most important part. Thank you, John.
Me.
Thank you, Unibear. Thanks to the crew inside there for doing all the hard work tonight. And thank you for watching. We will see you next week. Good night, and love everybody.